An elegant name for the strongest hurricane ever to hit the Bahamas, has killed at least 20 people and flattened thousands of homes. Now the storm has turned north and is threatening the US coastline. Hundreds of police, marines and health workers have been deployed to the worst hit islands in the Bahamas to bring aid in and get injured survivors out. Danny Eisdale reports.
Now that the storm has passed, we're beginning to carry out our damage assessments.
Generational devastation across Abaco and Grand Bahama.
Generational devastation. When the damage is so vast and so severe, not only those who lived through it will suffer. The consequences of Dorian could cripple these communities for decades to come.
Unbelievable destruction of this part of Marsh Harbor called the Mud and the P. This neighborhood is simply gone.
At least 20 are dead, and more will be found injured or killed as search teams work through what's left of the islands.
We need help. We need help.
And help is only just arriving for the survivors of a Category 5 direct hit. For 3 days, Dorian stalled above them. They sheltered and waited. Authorities are now going house by shattered house, leaving aid with those who won't leave and airlifting out those who are desperate to. Dozens have been taken to Nassau Airport to be reunited with their relatives. It's now a hub for aid.
That's all of it.
President Trump is sending supplies, including those originally intended for Dorian victims in Florida, who were spared in its path. A path he's been trying to predict for a week. The president said Alabama was in danger in a tweet on Sunday, but within 30 minutes his own National Weather Service publicly corrected him and could not have been any clearer. Alabama will not see any impacts from Dorian. We repeat, no impacts from Hurricane Dorian will be felt across Alabama. Still, he won't let it go.
Our original chart was that it was going to be hitting Florida directly. Maybe I could just see that, Kevin.
Time to hold up a 7-day-old projection map.
And you see it was going to hit not only Florida, but Georgia.
Take a closer look at the curious extra black line added to include an edge of Alabama in the strike zone. He was asked who drew it. Was it with a Sharpie marker pen, like the one he uses to sign his executive orders, perhaps?
And that map that you showed today looked like it almost had like a Sharpie.
I don't know.
Oh my gosh, things are blowing up there.
There are US states that remain in danger from this powerful hurricane. The Carolinas are being battered as Dorian slowly rages alongside the east coast.
Dorian is making its way up the east coast of America with storm warnings in place for the states of North and South Carolina. The powerful storm has already brought devastation to the Bahamas. UN officials have arrived pledging emergency aid. Dorian is the strongest ever hurricane to make landfall. 30 people are now known to have died, but that number is expected to rise. The worst damage has been on the Abaco Islands, where it's estimated 70,000 people need aid. From there, Aleem Maqbool reports.
This was one of the most popular resorts on these islands, torn apart by the brute strength of the storm. Tourists who tried to weather it have been left shell-shocked. But these were the sturdiest buildings in a place that wasn't even the worst hit. Elsewhere, the picture's even more desolate. Drive through Marsh Harbor a little down the road, and there's not a building in sight that hasn't sustained considerable damage. Well, this is where Hurricane Dorian made landfall, and those record-breaking wind speeds and ocean surges have left behind a surreal landscape of boats and vehicles and rooftops and kitchen appliances swirled in the air and flung across the land. And everyone here has a story of the terrors of Dorian.
The wind just had us fearful for our life. As one roof blew off, we ran to another house, that blew off. There were vehicles blowing in the background. It was just horrific. And to see the devastation now with all the bodies laying around, I feel though God has turned his back on the beautiful island of Abaco.
Many of the dead have now been taken away, but in the heat remains the unmistakable smell of death that suggests there are many more bodies to be found. For those who survived, the situation is desperate. Until a few days ago, many hundreds had lived in a huge shantytown here. There are few signs of the structures they lived in anymore.
No house, no food, no water, you know, so I think people no life, you see, for me too.
Aid is starting to get to some places, but the needs are massive, and the hurricane turned upside down the lives of so many. Alim Maqbool, BBC News, on the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas.
South Carolina. Hi Avery, how's it looking there now?
Well, Dorian passed across or along the coast of South Carolina basically throughout today. It's a very slow-moving storm so far. The southern half of the coast wasn't hit too hard. That's where I was stationed on Hilton Head Island, one of a number of barrier islands along the South Carolina coast. But the storm did batter the northern half of the South Carolina coast. Cities like Charleston, Georgetown, Myrtle Beach experienced a lot of flooding. Hundreds of thousands of residents are without power. But so far, no deaths reported. So that's certainly cause for optimism. Part of that is because hundreds of thousands of residents evacuated. The South Carolina governor days ago ordered the entire coast to evacuate, and a number of people. This is not their first rodeo. We've had a number of these hurricanes over the past few years, so people knew how to get on the roads and get out, and so there have been no deaths so far in South Carolina.
So how would you describe the mood there? Would you say it's relief?
Definitely relief where I was and on Hilton Head Island. The governor has been warning about this storm for days. We all saw what happened in the Bahamas, and so people were concerned, to a degree about what was going to happen. A number of people still didn't evacuate. I went to bed last night not sure exactly what things were going to look like when I woke up, but when I was out on the streets, there was just a lot of pine straw, a lot of branches on the ground, some down trees, but generally not a lot of damage. Now the northern half of the coast wasn't spared that. There were a lot of people that are still without power, people that have been without power, for hours. The entire town of Georgetown is without power because a transmission line went down. But there's a general feeling that this hasn't been as drastic, as catastrophic as some of the hurricanes in years past. We were hit by Hurricane Matthew in 2016, Hurricane Florence, and so those were storms that flooded rivers, that wreaked widespread devastation, and we haven't seen that so far here. It hasn't been as much rainfall as those. It's been about 7.5 inches so far. So far, I think a lot of people will consider South Carolina to have been lucky in this.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. We appreciate you coming on, Avery. Thank you very much. Avery Wilkes from the State newspaper in South Carolina.
Islands in the Bahamas. These are the latest pictures from there. Along with aid and equipment, officials are sending morticians and hundreds of body bags. Our correspondent Alim Maqbool has been aboard the British ship RFA Mounts Bay and sent this report.
Heading out to try to find more survivors of the hurricane. This military helicopter is taking off from a Royal Fleet auxiliary ship that tracked right behind Dorian as it smashed into the Bahamas.
Last night the helicopter discovered a group of people who'd been cut off, no communications for 5 days. We delivered aid. We're going first thing in the morning, this morning, to give them more food. So basically we are sort of the emergency response, so to speak.
And the military here was helping some communities, even as others close by were still feeling the brunt of the storm.
Well, this British ship really has been at the forefront of the international emergency relief effort following Hurricane Dorian. Right now it's launching a vessel loaded with heavy lifting equipment and vehicles to try to get to an area that was badly affected by the hurricane but hasn't yet been reached at all.
And they have often been the first outsiders to get to the most devastated areas. But new affected communities are still being found, like one we headed to in the north of Great Abaco Island. There, Kirk Sawyer had just left his house when Dorian tore through. Sheltering with a friend, debris flying around and huge waves coming in. He thought he wouldn't make it.
I told my friend, I said, hey, we were friends for almost 40 years. We ride together, we're going to die together here.
And not being able to tell his family outside he's alive has been tough. For them, he had a message.
Yeah, Uncle Kike here. He's alive, he made it through this. So, I'll see you all soon. Thank you all for being concerned about me. Love you all.
The reality is, many didn't survive. In Marsh Harbour, we saw more bodies being removed, and the signs are the recovery effort will go on for many days yet.
I honestly believe Abaco is finished. I think Abaco will not recover until the next 10 years, like fully recover, because everything is gone. Absolutely everything is gone.
The UK is distributing shelter and ration packs across affected communities, but even those of them who've been doing this through powerful hurricanes of recent years told us they'd never seen needs as great as this. Ali McBool, BBC News, in the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas.
India's attempt to
Part of the Bahamas is just 50 miles off the coast of Florida, and the Trump administration has promised help in the form of humanitarian assistance, help in the form of search and rescue operations, and help in other disaster response modes. But it is going to be a tough battle because the United Nations is estimating that 70,000 people there on the northern islands that were worst affected are in urgent need of food aid. Some areas there are utterly uninhabitable, and it would take months, if not years, to get people there back on their feet. Now, the official death toll is said still put at 30, but officials in the Bahamas say that is expected to rise considerably. One Bahamian official was quoted as saying the possibility existed of what he called an unimaginable death toll there.
The pictures are certainly extraordinary and show such devastation. That hurricane is now over North Carolina. Can you tell us the situation there?
Yes, it's kept us guessing here in the US, of course, for the last week and a half or so, but it finally made landfall on the outer banks of North Carolina earlier this morning, bringing with it very high winds and storm surges. Now, many people there had ignored warnings to evacuate. About 250,000 people had actually been urged to evacuate. A lot of them ignored that, and as a result, hundreds are trapped, having taken to higher ground. The Coast Guard has actually been brought in to try to airlift people out of that area. But this storm now headed out to sea, to the relief of many people here, and it's next expected to touch land in Nova Scotia, Canada. Richard.
David Willis there.
Again.
So far, authorities say the death toll in the Bahamas has passed 45. But with so many still missing and so many stretches of destruction still to be searched, it's feared many more are dead, waiting for recovery wherever the floodwaters left them.
The recovery team will check each section for persons who are still alive, any bodies that need to be recovered, and to check for hazardous material.
The government says the priority is helping the living. The Treasure Key Airport terminal is no place to wait, and the ticket counter is buried. Survivors seek shade wherever they can.
In my house, it felt like Bigfoot was on the roof, trying to break in from through the roof.
Some 70,000 are now homeless. Charles Cornish and his girlfriend have joined the slow queue of evacuees.
Right now, you know, there's so much people up there that they can't find. That place is no place to be right now. You know, until the government, I guess, you know, figure out, you know, how they can get that whole area clear.
But for many trying to evacuate the Bahamas, it's been one obstacle after another.
Please, all passengers that don't have U.S. visa, please proceed to disembark.
This ferry leaving Freeport for Florida was boarding when the rules about the documentation evacuees needed seemed to suddenly change.
So you have to take your baby off?
Yes, I have to take her off. I think this is terrible. I think they should allow everyone to come into the U.S. They originally said that you can come without a police record and without a visa, and now they're taking that back. That's really ridiculous. That's
How many people do you think had to get off, did you see?
They said 130 people had to come off.
After days with limited food, power and water, and hours of waiting in line to get a ticket to Relief, a 2.5-hour ride away, the ferry left without them.
Danny Astel reporting.